And at this moment, we go back to Cuba because people are paying their respects to the 32 fallen combatants that gave their lives in Venezuela in the moment of the imperialist attack that took place on January 3rd. Let's recall that today is the day in which Cuba is receiving the mortal remains of its 32 heroes, the 32 men who gave their life and were killed by U.S. military forces in their attack against Venezuela. These were men that were assigned on special missions in Venezuela for different reasons, with a long-standing cooperation between Cuba and Venezuela, and they were killed in this imperialist aggression. Today, Cuba receives their remains and pays their honors. They're honoring these 32 heroes that are going into history, both of Cuba, Venezuela, and the region as a whole, as men who gave their life in the defense of one of the most brutal attacks of the United States against the region, the bombing of Caracas and the states of La Guaira, Aragua, and Miranda as well. Over 100 casualties in Venezuela as consequence of the U.S. attacks. And these are the moments in which Cuba is paying their respect. Cuba is honoring their own heroes, those who gave their life for sister nation Venezuela in their fulfillment of the mission assigned to them by their homeland, Cuba, in a long-standing effort of solidarity in the defense of the sovereignty and self-determination of the entire region. Cuba continues to pay its respects. At this moment, let's recall that we are seeing images from the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the remains of these 32 fallen combatants have been placed. Earlier today, they were received at the International Airport José Martí in Havana. They were received there with the greatest honors. We heard from the Minister of the Interior of Cuba, who offered a few statements at that moment, statements that spoke on the importance of the fulfillment of that mission, the importance of the heroes who gave their life at that moment. And after that ceremony, that initial ceremony that took place in the International Airport of Havana, they were taken in a long caravan. We saw the journey. We also saw just a representation of the Cuban people were accompanying that moment alongside the main avenues of the Cuban capital, including Boyeros Avenue. And finally, they got to this place, the MINFAR, the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba, where we are seeing the mortal remains of the 32 combatants on display. Right at this time, 10 a.m. local time in Cuba, the ceremony is open to the public, for the public to be able to pay their respects, visit the site in an homage that is being paid not only by Cuban authorities, not only by the institutions, particularly the institutions in which all of these men collaborated in different sectors of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, but also an homage paid by the people. January 3rd, in this way, becomes a day that has marked Latin American history and that deeply unites, in particular, one more time, the trajectories and the history of both Venezuela and Cuba. Let's recall that was the day of the attack that took place in the early hours of the morning or late at night, that January 3rd, in which the United States bombed Venezuela, attacked Caracas, and also the states of Miranda, Aragua, La Guaira. Over 100 people were killed. This, according to Venezuelan authorities. We have been going over the effects, the consequences of such an attack following what happened that January 3rd. And Cuba played a significant role with these 32 combatants that were on special service and that were part of the defense of Venezuela at that moment. They were part of the defense forces that faced that U.S. aggression on site, on the territory. These are the 32 combatants that were killed by that U.S. aggression. We've also seen just hours ago, yesterday, that the injured combatants also came back, were also received with honors. The collaborators who lost their lives are now being saluted, and the members of the armed forces, along with the population, are paying their respects at this moment. Let's listen to Isabel Diaz, correspondent at the site, speaking on this important day for Cuba.
For its current along the Rancho Bollero Avenue, along the avenue, the people with pain and sadness. But it's also a moment of revolutionary reaffirmation to show that dignity, of course, of that all Cubans have, that was held high during the actions of these 32 Cubans, and that I'm certain that the actions of these 32 Cubans is the same as all Cuban people that today have shown being here. Thousands of Cubans, as far as we can see, they are standing along Rancho Bollero Avenue near the Revolution Square, and they have shown that conviction, that dignity of the Cuban people, that pain, but also marked with the revolutionary commitment. Right now, near the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, we can see a lot of people and school children that are standing in line with flags, with applause to the great work that the revolution has created, and these 32 Cubans that returned today to the homeland.
Those were the words of our correspondent on site, Isabel Diaz, being translated for you in teleSUR English at this moment as we continue to cover this important day, a day of honor and glory for Cuba as the island nation is receiving its 32 fallen combatants, victims of the U.S. imperialist aggression against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Those were the statements of our correspondent that has been following the minute-by-minute event. We were saying from very early in the morning the reception of the mortal remains at the Jose Marti International Airport, greeted by the Minister of the Interior at that moment, who highlighted the importance of their sacrifice for the project of Cuba, for the project of Venezuela in the face of the imperialist aggressions. Afterwards, they were taken through the city of Havana, through its main arteries and avenues, until we reach this place, the place that we are seeing right now. This is the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where we see the remains of the 32 fallen combatants being displayed for the different members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, their families, also Cuban personalities, and the population as a whole that we will definitely be seeing in the coming minutes, to be able to pass by, pay their respects, bid farewell to the 32 Cuban heroes who gave their lives in the latest and most powerful aggression by the United States against the region. We were saying and seeing on screen different relevant personalities. Abel Prieto, for example, relevant figure in Cuban culture, who has been one of the strongest voices throughout these years condemning the recent stage of United States aggression against the region in particular, and with a special force against Venezuela, an attack that has the particularity not only of being a grave violation of international law, but also of having been announced, because the President of the United States had said for months that he was about to lead an attack against a sovereign nation. Venezuela has had taken this concern, which had been as well denounced by Cuba in its long-standing solidarity between the nations. This was the images that we were seeing from Havana, and we were saying that that attack had been announced. Venezuela had taken it to international stages, international forums, stating that the United States nation was threatening a direct land attack against the country. Well, that attack happened on January 3rd. It left over 100 casualties, as reported by Venezuelan authorities, and 32 combatants from Cuba fell at that moment. And those are the heroes that are being honored right now. Our correspondent was talking about the children from different schools, different parts of the Cuban population that were waiting just outside in order for them to be able to see the mortal remains of the 32 heroes, to pay their respects at that moment. And we have been following and also learning a bit about the story behind the names, the story behind the numbers, a little bit of what those lives really were, so cherished today by the Cuban nation, the Cuban population, in appreciation for their commitment to a project, their commitment to a mission that led them to give their lives in combat against the United States aggression. And in the honor and the tribute that is today, special Latin American songwriters have presented a numerous of artistic songs in order to accompany this day. Let's listen a little bit as we see the images from Cuba.
Hoy acurruca un sillón, llanto beso de una madre, pero aunque el dolor taladre, sueños despiertos de un hijo, la patria le da cobijo al dolor ciego de un padre. Cuba se levanta entera, Cuba recibe el valor, Cuba viste del color digno de nuestra recibe el valor. ¡Viva Cuba!
Cuba stands up as a whole. Cuba, with the courage and the color that characterizes the island nation, once again in solidarity, in this case with Venezuela, as we see the images of the ceremony that is taking place at this moment to pay respect to the 32 fallen Cuban soldiers who gave their lives on the latest U.S. attack, the most severe attack that marked a moment in time for Latin America and the region, the attack on Venezuela, different points of Venezuela, that led in this case to the 32 fallen combatants from Cuba that were there to defend the sovereignty of Venezuela and the region. That was one of the songs we were saying that local artists composed for this moment, a way to honor as well the life of these 32 men. Lieutenant Yorki Verdesia Garcia was one of them. He had been born in 1995 in the province of Granma, in the eastern region of the country. When he concluded his studies, he went to the military service, and since he initiated his labors at the direction of personal security, he was highlighted and rewarded for his professionality and his way of delivering in every one of the tasks that he had assigned. He had been selected for a special mission in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and was one of the combatants who heroically gave their life in the U.S. attack of January 3rd. We continue to get to know some of these stories, these 32 stories that are now being displayed. We see their mortal remains as people from the Cuban population, different sectors of the population, begin to walk past, pay their respects. We continue to look at the lines outside the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. A little bit more on the stories. First Lieutenant Yoandis Rojas Perez was born in 1980 in the province of Guantanamo, also in the eastern region of the country. He was a technician by education, entered the MNINT in 2001, worked at different areas, was also security and protection official in Santiago de Cuba. He participated in different operations, relevant operations, was distinguished for his service and chosen for an internationalist mission in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, where he was killed, heroically fell in combat on January 3rd in the United States attacks against the Bolivarian nation. Some of the stories that bring us here today, as the Cuba has a day of mourning that is also a day of honor and glory, a day in which the island nation pays respects to these 32 fallen soldiers as Cuba is receiving their mortal remains. Today, just hours ago, their bodies were received at the Jose Marti International Airport of Havana, greeted with an official ceremony, and then taken to the place where they are today and where they will remain throughout the day for the different sectors of the Cuban population who are lining up outside the ministry to pay their respects to these fallen combatants, also who are following this through national television, who are following them through the different ways in which the population participates in this day of honoring and paying homage to those who gave their life for the mission that was assigned to them by their homeland in solidarity with the sister nation, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We were saying and seeing how families are coming to pay their respects, as well as military authorities, cultural personalities as well, paying respect to this 32 men who gave their life at this moment of January 3rd, the brutal attack of the United States against the nation of Venezuela. One of them was Captain Junior Esteves Samon. He was born in 1993 in the province of Guantanamo, with an outstanding trajectory in his studies. He, after going through the military service, went into the personal security direction, and he was highlighted and known for the sense of belonging, responsibility, and discipline that he displayed and showed during his assigned missions. He participated in several operations with different responsibilities in each of them. He was distinguished with an exemplary conduct and was chosen to fulfill an internationalist mission in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, where he heroically died in combat, facing the aggression of the United States, the attacks against Venezuela. We continue to look at the images. These are from just moments ago, as members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces were also coming to the ministry, to the main building of the ministry, and paying their respects at this moment. Let's recall the heroes were received at the international airport. There were words said to the honor that Cuba is paying them today. A speech that was led by the Minister of the Interior of Cuba, and they were then taken to where they are at this moment, where they will continue to be for the coming hours, as the people of Cuba has been invited to pay their respects. They're also following it through the local media outlets. We're bringing you this important moment, a moment in which Cuba is mourning its 32 fallen soldiers, as families are gathering to honor those who gave their life in the defense not only of their homeland, but of their extended homeland, in the defense of Latin America and the Caribbean. We were saying it before, Cuba, for decades and ever since the triumph of the revolution in 1959, has upheld internationalism and the importance of solidarity and the importance of boosting ties between the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean in order to face the aggressions of imperialism together. That is something that Cuba has maintained throughout its relationships in the global south, something that has made of Cuba such a relevant reference within the global south, its efforts of solidarity that extend through different realms and that are particularly focused, for example, on areas such as health and education. One of those important and significant ties of solidarity is between Cuba and Venezuela, two projects that were forever united after Commander Hugo Chavez came into the leadership of that South American country, following in the footsteps and legacy of Fidel Castro as well. They maintained a close relationship that they had even before Commander Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela. And at that moment, that those ties of solidarity between the nations were strengthened. The solidarity efforts were maintained throughout and across different areas of collaboration. We learned from the miracle operation in terms of health, education programs as well. And they were continuing, and this moment, the solidarity that Cuba pays Venezuela is one of the most important moments in which Cuba is showing their solidarity. Let's go to listen to correspondent Isabel Diaz.
Also, representative from Casa de las Americas, we saw the Cuban intellectual Abel Prieto, who also in statements to our media, he expressed the pain that is felt and also the indignation in the face of these imperialist aggressions that caused the loss of so many Cubans and Venezuelans, and that of course today the people shows that rejection as well to all these imperialist aggressions with the homage to these Cubans.
Those were some of the words of one of our correspondents on site, Isabel Diaz, at that moment. Let's recall different teams of teleSUR that are following this important event. She was highlighting the presence of different authorities, different personalities at this moment. Abel Prieto, for example, we were saying one of the most important figures, names within Cuban culture, also one of the most important voices. Let's continue and let's listen to some of what the people are saying outside.
When we heard the news, and we simply have said we must be here and we must do it in the best way possible, paying homage how they deserve and fulfilling with our responsibilities, and well, accompanying of course, we could not be here. You were saying that you felt moved when you saw the police moving before you, and you were here close to this area to enter this place. It is like that. Because when we heard the news that we had lost colleagues, our brothers, well, one imagines the greatness of those soldiers and also how complex it was. And also, when we look at them drive by, embraced by the Cuban flag, is something that moves you. It touches something very deep in you. And we just had to applaud. We had to shout the slogans that move Cubans. And there's a lot of feelings. And where we once again ratify that this land, we must continue to defend it, that this land must continue to be represented in other countries with our solidarity and our internationalism, which must continue. Values that they defended when they failed defending those values that you speak about. It is like that. Those values that are in Cuban blood. So it's good that you were here with us, also being part of this homage, well-deserved homage. Thank you very much, Captain.
Those were some of the words of part of the population, in this case, part of the Revolutionary Armed Forces as well, paying tribute at this moment, speaking to the national sentiment that, of course, is deeply touched at a day like today, a day of mourning for Cuba, for the 32 fallen soldiers, victims of the United States aggression. Also, a day of honor and glory, a day in which the country is celebrating the deeds of those 32 combatants. We were seeing images from the different authorities and also from the military authorities, not only from Cuba, but internationalist representatives from different military forces. We've seen representatives from Russia, China, Vietnam, Venezuela as well, all part of this important moment that pays tribute to these 32 soldiers at that moment. Let's listen.
How do you experience this moment, these sentiments among brothers, those combatants that swore on internationalism? They express a way of expression of their Cuban revolution. It is a mixture of pain and pride, because we still remember with honor our combatants that fell in the different internationalist campaign, and I'm certain that these young men will be remembered as well. And it's truly painful to see these images as the family is suffering. There is a child that is barely a month old that never met her father and is seeing him now for the first time, his face. It's truly painful. We also think that it's an historic moment for the homeland, and it's a reason for pride and to have this opportunity to pay homage to the combatants, which we must say they are not anti-air combatants or anything like this. They were fulfilling a specific mission, and the only thing that they had in their hands were light weaponry, and they faced an enemy that even that enemy had to recognize that they fought until the last of their ammunitions. And I believe that details have been known now, and there's still much more to be known about the heroism of these young men and in the way that they defended their mission and the integrity of President Maduro until the last moment. And these are reasons to feel very proud of them. And today our people is walking by here. We are seeing a very long line with our uniformed people at the forefront, which is the closest institutions to this place. But you see beyond, and you see a lot of people, a lot of combatants, most of them belonging to the CDRs, which we speak in name of them as well, to pay homage to our colleagues and to express our most heartfelt condolences to the family members. In a moment of unity, our homeland continues to be threatened, continues to be attacked in different ways. There is a very strong media campaign on social networks. We are seeing the cyber mercenaries, as we call them, receive an order to strengthen their work, to cause division and to deteriorate our country, to try to divide us. And I think this is a moment to reaffirm our commitment of unity with the revolution and the homeland, and that's the respect that we can see here today. Gerardo, all Cuban people seeing these combatants heroes. You are also known as the five heroes. Is that heroism the which our Cuban people has in you, in these combatants, in that resistance that our people has had to be able to repel so close to our coast as such a strong enemy? Do they create sentiments of anti-imperialism in our country? And we also remember those cartoons that you made against the U.S. imperialism. Gerardo, what is the message? What is the message at this moment we must send to our Cuban people? Well, in relation to what you were saying, when you analyze our history, what are we guilty of? What are Cuban guilty of when we have had to live under 6 decades of such asphyxiation? We are guilty of making a revolution in the nonsense of imperialism. That's the crime that we made, and that's the crime that they cannot forgive. And they think they're going to achieve now to take us down. Our message is to keep unity in our people. Our history shows how expensive the lack of unity is, and that's the commitment that we must have, that we must remain united, because the enemy knows and they respect us exactly because they know the heroism of our people. And when Cubans stand strong, when they thank you, Gerardo, for being with us, for being with our people here in the headquarters of the Ministry of Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the people of Havana, with a long line, is arriving here to pay homage to the 32 Cuban heroes that fell in Venezuela defending that revolution.
Those were the words of Gerardo Hernandez, one of the 5 heroes of Cuba, also member of the National Assembly of Cuba, speaking at this moment, an important moment of mourning and also of glory, of paying tribute that the nation is leading and honoring those 32 fallen combatants. We're looking at the national television interviewing and bringing us the testaments from the people, from the different sectors of the population that are at this moment being present in this tribute to the 32 fallen soldiers. Let's listen.
Yes, of course. To be here, we must be here as a Cuban, first of all, and as part of the people that we belong. We must come here with the pain that we carry in our heart due to the loss of our brothers, but we know that they fell with the sentiment of a duty fulfilled, following the ideals of Fidel and Raul. And it hurts a lot to come here to pay homage, but also what remains is the commitment with them and with the homeland to continue moving forwards and continue with the fight and to continue to resist. And as always, under the mission, the order of the commander-in-chief, which is to triumph. You say that it hurts. Does it hurt? Because we all felt this pain, but you also met some of the fallen ones. Yes, of course. When it hits you near, it hurts even more because they are daily co-workers of their every battle, every moment of tension, and when they leave, it hurts as if we were family members and also as brothers as we are. There is one of the person that was in your unit, you were saying me. Yes, there is one of the that unfortunately died in Venezuela land that worked with us, missions that we have accomplished during hurricanes, tornadoes, and we were always there in the front line. And that's a pain that hurts a lot. Well, for a leader, it's always going to be, we're always going to say that it's painful, the loss of a subordinate. We are talking, we are talking a Cuban, a colleague, a leader. All three can say that in a moment like this, we cannot be absent, but there's also a commitment towards the future. Yes, of course, to come here today, as I said before, is a commitment, first with Cuba, a commitment with Fidel and Raul, their teachings, a commitment with him, their families, with them, their families, and to be here next beside them in their moment of pain. And it's a commitment to never back down and always to continue in the path of victory. It is being known that our heroes fought strongly against the enemy. Do you talk about this as well? Yes, of course. Where there is a Cuban, there's always going to be a struggle. No one can have a doubt of this. When there is a Cuban, a worthy heir of this homeland, this is something that's always been said. This is how Almeida said, no one surrenders here. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for being with us here and sharing your thoughts. We know that the pain is part of this daily life that we're living today, because truly since January 3rd, everyone had been moved. Thank you.
Listening to these statements from some of the, not only citizens, but also other members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba, this young man was saying that when it hits you near, it hurts even more. Speaking about not only the general sentiment of mourning, of deep hurt that comes from knowing that 32 nationals, 32 compatriots fell in their fight against imperialism, that were killed by the United States Armed Forces, but also because some of these young men had personal relationships with the 32 people that gave their lives on that night of January 3rd, the attack from the United States against Venezuela. And he was also speaking about the situations in which these people get to know each other and in which these people have built relationships. And let's recall that the armed forces of Cuba have played a very significant role in a lot of the society building and prevention works that have to do with day-to-day life for Cubans. He was speaking, for example, of getting to know some of these men in the prevention works in terms of works that are being done before climate crisis such as hurricanes. So those are the types of operations in which the Cuban Revolutionary Forces are working. Let's continue to listen.
It's a moment to share pain with our people. We're here from the very hours at the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, and we share the pain of the family members of the 32 combatants. It's a moment of sadness, painful for our people, for their families. But we must also say that they fell fulfilling their task with dignity, with honor, in an unequal combat, but they knew with firmness defend the mission that they were fulfilling. And we must say that it's painful, it's saddening, but also it expresses the message of firmness, of courage, of valor, of dignity of all Cubans. Not only in the fulfillment in their international tasks, but because we can also say that they felt for us, they felt transmitting that message of firmness and valor and decision of commitment of our people to defend their revolution. So it's a mixture of that pain, that sadness, also with the recognition of their bravery, of their dignity, and that they did what Cubans are willing to do. I have to say also that as an institute, the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People, in the moment that aggression occurred against Venezuela and the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Deputy Celia Flores, the Solidarity movement reacted massively in all parts of the world, condemning the military aggression, calling it the way it is. despite the efforts of medias, of hegemonic medias of Western countries that try to disguise through a confusing vocabulary the criminality of the criminal nature of that aggression, and at the same time defending the right of Venezuela to be a sovereign and independent country. And I think we must say that when the news came out that the 32 Cubans fell in combat, we received multiple shows of condolences for the Cuban people, the Cuban revolution, of the different international solidarity organizations with Cuba. Also, as statements were made from certain political figures from within the US government, hostile statements, threatening statements against our country, against our people, and against our revolution, the solidarity movement with Cuba all over the world spontaneously responded with clear messages of support for the Cuban people, the revolution, and for the right of Cuba to be a sovereign and independent state, and also denouncing those threats. I believe that the Cuban people is going through a moment of pain, of sadness, but at the same time a moment of revolutionary firmness that we see it here today, as we are seeing so many colleagues coming through to pay homage to our heroes, and that we will see tomorrow in the march of the combatant people, and the people who reaffirmed their outrage and their commitment with these people, with these combatants that fell fulfilling their duty for us and for Venezuela. Thank you very much, Fernando, for being here with us. Words of the national hero of the Republic, and also president of this Institute of Friendship with the Peoples.
Those were the words of Fernando González Llor, deputy member of the National Assembly and also one of the national heroes of Cuba. He was highlighting the effects and what happened after that attack of January 3rd that led to the tragic death, the heroic death of these 32 combatants that are now being homaged here in Cuba, but in particularly just the different displays of first solidarity, the different displays of condolences that came from different parts of the world, from different governments, also international organizations, again, time and time again, highlighting the importance of solidarity and international ties for Cuba. Fernando was also highlighting and showing how this situation and the tragic death of 32 Cuban combatants from the United States, and particularly from the Trump administration, came different aggressive comments directed against Cuba in particular. Of course, bringing up a history of long-standing aggression from the United States against the island nation. But also in that context came, Fernando was highlighting, the solidarity and the shows of support in the face of that aggression. So in his words, this national hero of Cuba was saying that this was a moment of sadness for Cuba. Sadness, but also a moment of revolutionary firmness. Let's continue listening to the people.
It's also the feeling of not being able to understand how the cruelty of the empire can take away the life of these young men. Behind all these men, they left a family behind. A family that will not be abandoned, but that will experience difficult, because it will be difficult to forget this. It's not only about patriotism, it's not only about the representation of them as heroes, but also that humane side behind that uniform, behind those military ranks. There's a person that has a family that loves them, and that in many occasions also depends on them for their well-being. I know that you have been caring for the families of several of their colleagues, because we also saw one of the fallen combatants also was with you. One of the combatants was a colleague of ours, a very young colleague. It was someone you can always count on. It was a person that you could give him any task and he will be the first to volunteer for it. A good partner was someone that you can not only work but also you could share different moments. You could come with him for anything. He was someone. What hurts the most is that he was a very young man and he leaves behind a son. It's very difficult, it's very complicated. Family, everything. It's a person that truly represents a lot of courage, and today we are very proud of that step he took, that decision, that difficult decision that he took, that was truly not his, because this is not something that anyone expected. It was something very unjust, something unexpected, and represents all the repression and that no one within imperialism sees that they're cutting the branches of the future of so many innocent people. Things must not be solved like this. People should not go to war. We are in a civilized world, and I don't understand. I'm a military woman, and I understand that war exists, but I understand that things can be done in a different manner so that those lives wouldn't have to end. But values, of course, above all, that defend humanism, peace, and independence of the people. And here, truly was not at play the independence of Venezuela. There are imperialist pretensions that have taken to this regrettable situation. The engine that made this possible is the hegemonic actions, is the geopolitical position that Venezuela has, that Nicaragua has, that the countries of the South have. Imperialism has lost ground, and that's how they see us, as their backyard. What I wanted to tell you is that speaking with our colleagues at the unit is the why. Why did they give that step? Why? Because they had courage, they have value. Even the US president had to recognize that those colleagues that are part of these people, which is a brave people, is a very strong people. And you know what the Cuban has, which I cannot say it here. So it is very simple to understand. Che always said we could not trust imperialism, not even a little bit. Today, in the 100th anniversary of Fidel, we cannot forget that if there is a value that Fidel always promoted in Cuban people was anti-imperialism, we must reinforce that value. The hate against our enemy, which is something that moves us, because the enemy is not the people of the US, but the government of the United States, the lobby of power. They are our enemies. And if they attack us, we must defend. And of course, there's the answer. Why they do it and for what? What we are getting from here is the experience that the enemy exists and that we must continue to prepare ourselves for defense. And that's why I take on this moment to call on the Cuban people. We must be prepared. Everything that is done to prepare is going to be blood that will not have to be shed in a combat that we don't want, but if it were to happen, we will be guided by the unbreakable faith of Fidel Raúl.
Also, revolutionary armed forces, colleagues, partners, friends of those 32 Cubans who gave their life and who fought at that moment of the attack from the United States against Venezuela. Some of the words, some of the ideas that they were highlighting, one of them stating that she was a close friend of one of the combatants who gave his life for Venezuela, for Cuba, in the fulfillment of his duty. She described him as a colleague of many hours, of long hours of work, of sharing different tasks together. He described him as a person that she could always count on, someone who could do anything that was entrusted in him, and someone that was sure to take the next step forward in order to fulfill whatever he had to do. Those are the personal ties, the personal stories behind what we are seeing today in Cuba, the mourning of the 32 heroes that fell in combat against the United States on January 3rd in Venezuela, that are also friends and families. She was also highlighting about one of these combatants, what we can probably say about many of them, the fact that not only was he a very young man, but he is leaving a son behind. He was the father of a son, all members of families that, of course, today are in mourning and also participating in this, paying respects to those 32 fallen combatants that have come back to their homeland, that fell in battle in Venezuela as they were assigned on special missions in the sister nation that happened to be there at the moment in which the United States decided to strike an unprecedented attack against a Latin American nation. And they, as their own colleagues and friends were just saying, they did not hesitate to take that extra step forward. That even the United States President himself had to say that these were brave men who gave their lives for it. Let's continue listening to some statements.
In the Ministry of the Armed Forces, honor to those that deserve honor. This is a difficult moment for our people, but it's a moment that transmits so many teachings for Cuba and for Latin America and for the rest of the world. 32 Cuban heroes fulfilling with their duty, as requested by the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. They offered their life to safeguard the conquest of the Venezuelan people. They're fulfilling with their duty, therefore it hurts us. Mixed feelings, Coronel. Yes, mixed feelings with a lot of pain, but also with a lot of satisfaction. It was recognized even by the U.S. government, the courageous Cuban people, what it did in that moment of military aggression. Colonel, you were telling us that part of this group that today we're paying tribute to were part of your work unit. 11 of them, you knew them in person. How were they? Let's give our people a bit of knowledge how these heroes were. Well, we had the opportunity to work with 11 of these combatants that were there. Sons, fathers, as we all are, all citizens of Cuba. And they were extraordinary people, hard workers, worthy of our revolution, and that's why they were selected to carry out this sacred mission. Their parents, their family members accompanied them here today with a lot of pain. We can see it in their faces, and it is on us to continue this mission, to respect the mission that they had to fulfill. And if we were to be honest, we'll do the same way. How our commander taught us, this person that comes to our mind in a moment of so much pain. In the year of the 100th anniversary of the Commander-in-Chief, precisely his teachings of the historic leader of our Cuban Revolution are not forgotten. And it's important to remind our people that precisely from here, from the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, came
taking part in this tribute, this moment in which Cuba is honoring the 32 fallen soldiers in combat in Venezuela. Some of the things and ideas that they were highlighting, apart from the closeness, the importance of being here at this moment. Let's recall Cuba is honoring its 32 fallen combatants that took part in the defense against the U.S. imperialist attack that took place on January 3rd against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. For different reasons, these combatants, of whom we've been hearing just brief bits that give us an idea of the lives behind those names. They had been assigned on special missions of solidarity, of internationalism in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. They happened to be there at the moment in which the United States decided to take this brutal attack against a sovereign nation of the region. And they were there to defend their mission and gave their life in honor of that internationalism and international solidarity that Cuba has always stood for. One of the men giving his testimony over there was saying, of course, that this comes back to the words that Cubans have learned decades ago from El Che himself, saying that no one could trust imperialism, not one little bit. And at that moment, this is being much more evident, much more clear. Let's continue listening to some of the testimonies. Also, one of the testimonies was highlighting the anti-imperialist nature from the very beginning of all of Fidel's teachings. So just to the idea of how this anti-imperialist sentiment traces back to the leaders of that Cuban revolution, and that it has been taught by generations of Cubans so far. Let's listen.
Millions of compatriots that are going to be able to defend this revolution and this land because they are the sons of Martí, of Maceo, of Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro. And they also represent the symbolism that we are doing it here on the year of the 100th anniversary of a Commander-in-Chief. We regret the loss. And from that very early hours of January 3rd, we continue to support from all of our trenches, from our works and responsibilities, and we pay homage and tribute as all Cuba is doing, and as we will do it tomorrow as well, doing that march here in the capital and in all the main cities in the provinces, municipalities across the country. We are here. It is truly something dignifying, and it represents a pride for the armed forces and the Interior Ministry, and for the Cuban people see all these people that here under the reign is still organized and reunited and gather here to pass and pay homage to our 32 heroes that fell in combat in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We are proving once again, Abdiel, that this country is of homeland or death we will triumph. I'm gonna ask you to move a bit because the camera is getting wet, but we don't want to interrupt the conversation, but let's continue it here because
from this moment of ceremony in which Cuba is paying tribute to its 32 fallen combatants, 32 soldiers that gave their lives in Venezuela in defense of that moment, in defense of that region, in the fulfillment of their internationalist mission. We continue to see the images. These are images from Havana, from the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the ceremony is being held, where the remains of those 32 fallen combatants are being displayed for the population to pay their respects, to participate in this moment of mourning and honor. Let's continue listening to some testimonies.
Por las filas del Ministerio del Interior. Ya te digo, representa un compromiso.
And I was saying, it represents a commitment,
para nuestras instituciones,
pride, not only for our institutions, but also for the Cuban people.
32 compañeros que como
There are 32 colleagues.
Veíamos en directo la transmisión.
We were listening to some of those testimonies at that moment. Let's recall that Cuba is paying tribute to those 32 fallen combatants. Many of them, many of the people who are coming to this moment of mourning and moment of tribute to those 32 heroes of Cuba, we're highlighting the fact that this is the 100-year centenary, 100th anniversary of Fidel. Let's recall that Cuba is commemorating those 100 years of the Cuban revolutionary leader, and at this moment in which the greatest force of the United States has decided to strike in Latin America, and Cuba has played such an important part, giving the life of 32 heroes, that sentiment, that anti-imperialist sentiment that Fidel taught, not only in his speeches, not only on the entire global South, but particularly in the Cuban population, is being relived once again in the speech, in the hearts, in the emotions of all of those people, families, friends, who are coming to this place in the center of Havana to pay their respects, to honor those 32 men that gave their lives to defend their greater homeland, in this case, in Venezuela. Those were the images from Cuba at this moment of mourning, but also a moment of honor, a moment of paying tribute to those 32 heroes. We will continue having all this information from Cuba, from around the world. For now, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR.